A domain, also known as a uniform resource locator, exists to make an IP more accessible and easy to remember. An IP is essentially just a string of numbers, much like a phone number, that is separated with full stops rather than spaces. Unless you're Sheldon Cooper, an IP with seemingly random numbers is hard to remember, especially when you're visiting many sites per day. Therefore, a domain name like this is easier to remember than this hump of mess, yet both lead to the same place on the internet. Your IP is always unique to you, just like a fingerprint. When someone types your IP and searches for it, they will be directed to your website. A domain name server, or a DNS for short, acts like a middleman to direct you where you should be. They are like the equivalent of a phone book. They manage a massive database of domains and translates them into IP addresses. Each domain has an IP, and each IP has a domain, a one-to-one relationship. The DNS matches the domain to its linked IP and then directs the user to the address they're trying to reach. The biggest question here is why can we not just cut out the middleman and access the address just by domain? Well, the simple answer is that a computer cannot understand words or characters. A domain is easy for a human to read and understand, however, computers and machines only operate on numbers. Hence the reason for an IP address. So a DNS is implemented for the user not having to remember any numbers, making the internet easier to use, just like a phone book, but without the book or a phone. Understanding the structure of a domain can be important. A domain has a minimum of three parts. We begin with the World Wide Web, or www. We proceed to the domain name and end with something called a top-level domain, each being separated by a full stop. Each domain online must begin with the famous three-character acronym www. Following the domain name is the readable and memorizable word for humans. Usually just querying this alone can lead you to the place you're wanting to go for some sites. You can buy these domains online and configure some settings so your web page has a place on the internet. Finally, we have the top-level domain. They are known as domain suffixes such as .com and .net and more. They again make it easier to remember than IPs, however it serves another purpose. Let's say we had a domain name of go subscribe to me, please, and we tag the top-level domain of .com and .net. Technically, these are two different domains, therefore they will lead you to a different place on the internet. This feature of a top-level domain adds much more possibilities of live websites online. There are some instances where there can be more than three parts. Secondary domains such as .co.uk or .co.is are examples. These are usually regional domains. Unless it was printed before 1991, you will not find the Soviet Union on a map. The country got dismantled in 1991, however its online presence still exists to this day. The .su domain name has survived decades after its country's permanent end. As of today, more than 120,000 sites have been registered with this .su suffix. Because of how easy it is to register, the domain has attracted a lot of attention from cybercriminals for a safe haven to conduct business. Activities such as spam, DDoS, and hijacking computers that can steal bank accounts are common use. A four-letter .ussr domain name would have been more appropriate, but a 19-year-old Finnish student led to the .su, raising many questions on how much influence international teenagers had over Soviet cyberspace. The domain business.com was the most expensive domain ever sold. In 1999, the domain was purchased for $7.5 million and now remains the most expensive. The value spiked after Dow Jones, one of the biggest financial and business news company, tried to buy the domain. The domain was sold but to another company called R.H. Donnelley for $345 million. 2 years later, the company declared bankruptcy. If you're a web designer, you would know that getting your client's websites ranked higher in Google's search bar is a must. Using a SEO-friendly domain can help you with this. Usually the top-level domain, such as .com, is ranked fairly higher than something like .me or .shop. However, these uncommonly seen domains can be useful. It can give a user an idea of the website before clicking onto it. The best way to impress Google is to impress people. If users perceive your domain as credible, catchy, and simple, so will Google. Therefore, your website will be ranked higher as clearly people are clicking onto it. In terms of SEO, a domain name is not the only thing that helps its ranking. There are other things that need to be thought of to get the website ranking as high as possible. Comment below if you would like for me to make a video on SEO. Before 1995, every domain that were registered was completely free. In 1995, Network Solutions were granted authority to start charging for domain names, which started at $100 for every 2 years registration. Ever since ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers were formed, a goddamn long name, domain registration price dropped considerably. September 29, former Google employee Sanmay Ved purchased Google.com for the colossal price of $12. He bought the domain name after the company somehow lost ownership of it, essentially meaning he owned Google. However, he just had it for a minute as he returned the ownership back to Google. Conflicts over domains and ownership aren't settled amicably or cheaply. In Google's case, it seemed as though they missed a deadline to renew the domain, creating an opportunity for someone else to purchase it themselves. In a security blog, the company revealed that they wanted to give Ved $6,000, but after Ved said he would donate the money to charity, Google gave double. Well, not everyone can say they owned a multi-billion-dollar company just for a minute.